Okay. Hi, Teresa. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I was looking at your bio. You were a professional singing and dance teacher at one time.
Yes. In the DC area, I perform professionally in my 20s. It's been a while.
You're not doing that anymore.
I still teach.
You teach dance?
Yes.
Oh, what kind of dance do you teach?
Ballet. Right now, mostly ballet, but I did teach ballet and tap and jazz and acro and musical theater.
Did COVID kind of shut you down for a while?
Yes, our studio actually closed. It was way too small to socially distance.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. But maybe
Yeah.
are things going back to normal somewhat now for you?
Hopefully by summer-ish fall, we'll be back.
Okay, great. Well, best of luck for that. You've also got a book out. The book is called Torment to Triumph.
That was the book that I wrote in 2013. And it was about Dan's story here, how he lost over 105 pounds and ran the Marine Corps Marathon on two titanium hips.
Oh, wow.
And that was the nonfiction version of a very inspiring story. And then just this year, I published that same type of story about an obese teenager, and I made it fiction. And it's called Meredith's Triumph.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's two different books. So Torment to Triumph
Right.
is Dan's
Yes.
story, and Meredith's Triumph is a fiction based on that. Okay. So, Dan, you're here for the interview as part of the testimonial for the weight loss program. Overeaters Anonymous, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Why don't you just tell us the story? How overweight were you and what was happening? You know, Teresa just mentioned titanium hips. Was that as a result of the obesity, or just explain the whole story for us?
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and what led me to this, 10 years ago, I was almost 300 pounds at 5'9", and I started having a lot of issues related to morbid obesity. And what it involved was kind of looking back at kind of my history. My story begins essentially in childhood. You know, I always associated food with wonderful fun times and family get-togethers, and throughout school and that, it wasn't a big deal, you know, because I was involved a lot in sports and that, so the weight was kind of stabilized. But after into the 20s and so, when you start adulting,
Yeah.
life happens. You know, you go through deaths of loved ones, divorce, any kind of myriad of concerns that come up with that. And my way of coping was unfortunately overeating. And just like an alcoholic or an opioid addict has their drug of choice, food was my drug of choice, especially starches. Never met a starch I didn't like. Lots of carbs, lots of sugary food. And it got to a point, you know, I was hiding with it. I was using food as a coping mechanism with all these different events. I would overeat more. I would isolate. It's a disease of isolation.
Yes.
And it's a very chronic condition too. It's not something that really goes away. It's something I have to be cognizant of all through, you know, even now after 10 years, and the weight release, the weight loss. As I got into my late 20s and 30s and continually overate through all these different problems, and then probably late 30s, early 40s, I started really having clinical manifestations of being morbidly obese. And that started with, first I had a Bell's palsy, which at first I thought was a stroke. You know, that's where you have a facial nerve paralysis, where you have the drooping face, and you know, that was a little frightening.
Oh, I bet.
It actually happened the same age as Terry's father died of a massive stroke at age 49. And that's kind of thought, wow, I really should have been taking better care of myself as was heading to the emergency room. But it was a Bell's palsy. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough of a wake-up call. You know, you would think you would stop, but I kept on overeating, and this persisted. I eventually had I had a heart attack, and as a result of this, and was in ICU for a few days, had a cardiac procedure, and my main concern was getting released from the hospital so I could get away from the low salt cardiac diet and get back to my normal food, which I did. You know, like I say, you'd think it was be a wake-up call, you know, having a heart attack and these other symptoms, but it wasn't enough. And I just continued to overeat. And by this time, I became apathetic. I mean, I tried so many different programs, so many, you know, I'm not going to mention specific ones, but pretty much not everyone, but several commercial programs out there. And I think of the thousands of dollars spent on these, and I would lose 20 pounds at a time. But something always happened where I would fall off the wagon, so to speak, and end up putting on the weight, and usually a lot more than I had lost. And eventually I was pre-diabetic. My cholesterol levels were sky high. You know, when you get your lab work done, that's kind of concrete data. My triglycerides, for example, were 10 times the norm.
Ooh.
They're over 1,600. The norm is less than 160. So, and I got to a point, I knew I needed to do something. I was apathetic. I didn't know what to do. I had tried this, and I'm saying, what the heck's wrong with me? Why don't I have willpower? You know, I thought, am I that weak? Other people don't have this problem. And it all starts a cycle. You know, it starts the self-loathing, kind of like what Meredith goes through in her story. There's a lot of kind of undertones or covert prejudice against morbidly obese people, I've found, whether in the workplace or just in general. And it's not right, it's not fair, but it's just kind of the way it is. So as I was struggling with this, I mean, I became very depressed. You know, I had the dual diagnosis. I wasn't diagnosed, but it was depression and addiction. And at some points, I was seriously considering suicide. I had 3 beautiful daughters at this time. It's a feeling of hopelessness. I mean, you wouldn't think food, something that you need to survive, how it could be a problem, you know, like alcohol or drugs. And it was for me. And
well, let me interject here for a second. Here's the big problem with that. And I also struggle with my weight. I have probably about 50 pounds overweight at this point. And I've tried every diet known to mankind. And I've gotten to the point where I have maintained my weight. I haven't put any on, but I can't seem to lose it no matter what I do. And the one issue that you brought up that I wanted to touch on again is that food is acceptable in our society. Okay,
yes.
Being a drug addict isn't.
Yes.
And the difference is that people don't think of food as something that's, like you said, that's bad for you. We sort of create our social events around food. It's anytime you have a social event, there's dinner, there's lunch, there's snacks, there's something. I mean, even I recently went to a funeral and they put out a spread of food at the reception after the funeral that was unbelievable. And you would think that in a grieving kind of sad time like that people wouldn't be interested in eating. But the way I saw people chowing at this funeral was unbelievable. So there isn't the stigma with food. Unfortunately, some of us have, for lack of a better word, the fat gene, because I know plenty of people that can eat 20 meals a day and 10,000 calories and never put on an ounce. Yeah. You know, those are the people that we hate. I know. But some of us, we just look at food and put on weight. And it is a constant struggle. It will be a lifetime struggle. The one question I did want to ask you, Dan, is did the doctors ever suggest gastric bypass for you?
It was a possibility. It wasn't seriously discussed, though I did seriously consider that at some point. But it just wasn't, ultimately it wasn't for me, you know.
Yeah, because my understanding of it, I asked my doctor about it and he said, no, you're not, to put it bluntly, he said, you're not fat enough.
Yeah.
He said, you know, they don't generally do that unless you're 100 pounds plus overweight.
Right.
So you were kind of like right at the line there, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I was definitely over 100 pounds, and it probably could have been. But it just, and if it helps people, you know, God bless them. If it works for them, that's great. It wasn't for me.
It wasn't for you. Okay. So let's get on to what did you do when you finally realized that you've got to get this weight off, or it could be a matter of life and death. What was your first step?
Well, I got to thinking, you know, as I mentioned, we had 3 daughters, and as they were younger, it got to a point where living up north, and we had an old split level home, and just walking up 6 steps to get to the upper bedrooms, I was huffing and puffing, and, you know, it was a real effort, and I had trouble moving, so much pain, back pains, and all that. I just thought, you know, what would happen if one of the girls was in harm's way and I needed to run after them? I didn't think I could do that without collapsing, you know. So that kind of, and I knew I had to stop eating. I mean, I would work full time. I'd come home on the way home in a drive-through, get a big meal, eat that, sometimes stop for a dessert afterwards, then head home and have a full dinner. I mean, this was my lifestyle. So finally, it just got to a point. Now, for me, I'm not an expert, I'm not a dietitian, but I'm just sharing what worked for me. And it may not be for everybody, but the only thing, it had to be kind of a spiritual awakening in my case, and it's that way for a lot of people. They say there's a physical, emotional, and a spiritual aspect of this disorder, this malady, this disease process, if you will. What was missing from the other programs for me was the spiritual part. I was raised with a spiritual tradition, and I always believed in a higher power. But for some reason, I didn't think it was important enough for my higher power to spend time on my silly little food problem. You know, my higher power had problems all over the world that were much more needing of his concern. But that's what finally stopped it for me. I mean, I literally got down on my knees and said, I don't know what to do. Please help me. And call it what you will. A feeling of, a warm kind of fuzzy feeling came over me. It sounds weird. I might describe it as the Holy Spirit. Some might say it's whatever spiritual entity they believe in that suddenly was with them, and events seemed to happen. I was able to find my wife found a book about Overeaters Anonymous while going to the Alcoholics Anonymous, and some of the 12-step programs have a store. They have a gift shop and bookstore, and she found this book there, and I started reading the stories that the people were sharing, and these are my stories. I wasn't unique. These are people that got it. I mean, I'm not going to be arrested for driving while eating too many Twinkies. You know, like you said, it's not like it's
not like alcohol and drugs. You know.
Yeah, exactly. But nonetheless, for me and for a lot of people, it is a chronic, progressive, deadly malady, disease, whatever you want to call it. And that's where I was heading. And I'm just very grateful that I was led to this, you know, to this program. And things just really start to happen with that. You know, read the book, and then found someone that had a program of fitness, you know, of exercise and food, becoming accountable, you know, having a food plan, and learning about portion sizes. Portion sizes don't necessarily mean that I can eat the whole package of potato chips or whatever it is, you know.
We've got about 1 minute left, and I just wanted to hit on one thing. So you lost 100 pounds, correct? How long did it take you to lose that?
Well, it didn't take too long because it was motivated by a work colleague that, gee, when I started losing weight, that we should sign up for the Marine Corps Marathon. So it involved, it was about 7 months or so, basically.
Well, that's pretty fast for 100 pounds.
It was,
yeah.
Yeah, it was very fast. I mean, I had started before the intense training, lost probably 20 pounds or so within 2 months. Yeah, but yeah, it's normally, people are affected differently, obviously. And for this training and that's why it was kind of quickly. And despite the grace of my higher power, we've been able to keep it out for the most part for a little over 10 years now.
Well, that's fantastic. And congratulations on running on the marathon as well.
Thank you.
Super. Do you have a website, Teresa, that you want to give out for your book?
Yes, it is author Theresa Corbley Siller.com.
You want to spell that out real quick? Just then we'll put it up on the screen.
Sure. Thank you, Douglas. AUTHOR, Teresa, THERESA, Corbley, CORBLEY, Siller, SILLER.com. Author Theresa Corbley Siller.com. It's all one word.
Great. And hold up your book again, please.
Okay, this is Meredith's Triumph.
Super. Okay, well, Teresa and Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. And Dan, thank you again for sharing your story. It was quite inspirational.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. It's an honor.
Best